Hi, I'm Richard Von Busak. Welcome to a special end-of-the-year cinema scene. Hi, I'm Richard Von Busak, film critic for Metro Newspapers. Well, we're coming to the end of a year and a decade. I know we all want to say good riddance to. But we're going to be discussing, we're using a different format today. We're going to be discussing with a series of different guests their two favorite films of the year. And on my right is a familiar face, Lisa Jensen, a film critic for Good Times.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Lisa. It's good to see you again. Now, when you go over the list of the films, you've been doing your calculating. Are you completely done at this point?
I'm not completely done because a lot of the movies that will end up in everybody's top 10 list at the end of the year are movies that haven't played in this area yet. Some of them won't come to Santa Cruz until like February. So
yeah, it's a damnable thing.
List.
Yeah, it's got to do with the Oscars. But well, the partial list.
Yeah, well, I have to say that one of the movies that I really liked the most this year was Up. The Pixar film. Yeah. It's a wonderful family-friendly, cartoon. It's I shouldn't say kiddie cartoon, but it's for families and children. Perfectly suitable, very funny. Mm-hmm. But it dares to suggest in its cartoon format that older people, seniors, had complete complex lives before they became cranky old men, like the main character in this movie. Mm-hmm. And the first 15 minutes of this movie, which explores the whole childhood youth of this guy that becomes the hero of the movie, yes. Who's a cranky old man when it starts, is just incredibly moving. It shows you that people that are older, they were children, they were spouses, they were lovers, they were, they had these whole, they had dreams and everything. And the first 15 minutes of this movie that tells you the backstory of this character is I mean, I probably cried in this movie more than any other movie I saw all year.
It's funny that you should mention that because, you can mention things like the Sarah McLachlan song from Toy Story 2, mm-hmm. or some of the parts of WALL-E, people start like tearing up like they just bit into a horseradish. And but the thing that bothers, I mean, this to me was just pure cinema. Yeah, and I thought it just worked so beautifully, and it showed how cinema works, mm-hmm. with a minimum of dialogue, with storytelling and pictures.
Right.
What bothers me is that some people say, "Well, this was a cute movie," and that's where I go nuts.
Oh, I don't think so.
Yeah, the cute aspect of it eluded me. I think there's like more turbulent elements and mm-hmm. everything from like things that are forgotten in storytelling in film now, such as the principle that the hero and the villain should want the same thing, but they go about it by different ends, and that's the thing that makes them different. Yeah. Well, go on, please.
Well, no, I loved it. I loved it. It's cute in that it's funny and
it's multicolored. It's got a lot of balloons in it.
Right.
And so forth.
It's got funny dogs that talk, and it's got great stuff. But it's a very serious theme, and it's a very serious idea behind the story, and they do that in a cartoon format. But it's an incredibly moving film.
Now, what else have you seen that you were sure was I mean, you probably came out of Up thinking this is on the top 10. This is easy.
Yeah, that was easy.
That's kind of the way I felt. One.
Yeah. But the other one, I have to admit, looking back, the movie that I saw this year that I probably was most adamant about getting other people to see, like I'd grab people by the lapels and say, "You've got to go see this movie," was I don't know how you're going to feel about this, but it was Julie and Julia.
Oh, well.
And I think Julia, and you can say, people talk about, oh yeah, the Julia, Meryl Streep was fabulous as Julia Child, mm-hmm. but the woman doing the blog and all that stuff, Amy Adams, it was so boring. And which is, I agree with that.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not going to, disavow any of that. But I do think for the gal that actually wrote the blog and kind of brought brought Julia Child back to the next generation. She wrote the blog, she got the book contract, and the movie was made. And for that reason, we have Meryl Streep's fabulous performance as Julia Child.
I mean, the way that film was made to me is an example of a compromise. I was so glad it worked out. No, I mean, she was a delight. It was so much fun watching Meryl Streep. She was just so enjoying herself, and a lesson to anybody watching, just like to try to embrace that kind of life, that larger
Well,
you know, that sensuality
yeah.
and that just the gregariousness. And the curiosity, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, the French are always like a joke in the cinema. And it drives me nuts.
Yeah, right.
And,
yeah.
Yeah, the unabashed francophilia of that was also a pleasure.
Well, that was it. If you love Paris, if you love cooking, you know, this is the movie for you. And you know, it's not just Meryl Streep's performance being fabulous, which it was.
Yeah.
But the idea, Julia Child herself, that she gets this movie in tribute to her, we get to rediscover this really, truly original American eccentric who was Julia Child, who did not fit that demure, obedient 50s woman mode
Absolutely,
at all.
absolutely.
And that's what I really loved about that movie.
Excellent supporting acting by Stanley Tucci.
Oh, he was great.
Beautiful and dapper. Yeah. It's funny because I just saw him in The Lovely Bones, and it was like one of his worst performances. But this was one of the finest ones, like showing you how you react to a larger than life figure by just underplaying like crazy.
Right. No, he was great. I mean, it was very well acted. I loved it. It was great.
Now, what about finalists? I mean, is there anything else that, after that top two, was there anything else that really stuck out?
Oh, there were lots of movies. I mean, there were movies that I thought were pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have movies that was passionately, you know, beyond those two that I was crazy about. I did kind of like The Boys Are Back with Clive Owen, just because I thought Clive Owen was really, really good, and I liked the whole Neverland take about this suddenly, you know, widower father who has to raise his two boys by himself, and how he finally has to grow up. I kind of like that thematic element of it.
Well, good enough. Listen, thank you very much for coming on down. It's always a pleasure to see you, and you're going to try to restart Cinema Scene, so we'll be seeing more of you, I'm sure.
Okay, that'll be great.
Okay. We now have in our show Alejandro Adams. He's one of the rising talents in Bay Area film. His film Canary made an enormous splash on the independent film scene. And I just got the glad news that his newest film, Babnik, is going to be playing at CineQuest 20 coming up in February?
That's right.
February, okay. Well, anyway, Alejandro, I wanted to ask you, you've been a guest here on Cinema Scene before. I wanted to ask you what you thought the best film of the year was.
I didn't see much.
Okay.
I'm not a professional film watcher. I wish I were. It's an awesome gig.
Yeah.
Of what I saw, I thought Two Lovers was
the James
phenomenal.
Gray film.
The James Gray film.
Mort was a big fan of it.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
I did not care for James Gray's other films, actually.
Yeah, I didn't either.
This is nothing like them, other than the fact that Gray is actually a New York filmmaker who seems like a regional filmmaker. He's not. It doesn't feel like, oh, another film set in New York. It very much feels like he knows Brighton Beach, from a class perspective, from a race perspective.
Describe the neighborhood. Describe this neighborhood he's kind of putting his stamp on.
That's tough. I think the way it's portrayed in the film, you know, you have this Shiksa, Gwyneth Paltrow, who's put up in this sort of lower class neighborhood by a lover.
She's a kept woman.
Exactly, and as this Jewish guy who's done well and gone on somewhere else, who's put her up in this sort of less flashy neighborhood. Yeah. And Joaquin Phoenix is the lead, and he's there with his parents, and they're struggling to have a dry cleaning business. And he's like really kind of flunked out of life. He's got a number of troubles. The first thing we see is he tries to kill himself.
Right.
He tries to drown himself, and then we know, like, almost immediately after that, it's revealed that he's tried to kill himself at least on one other occasion. So this woman who's drawn to him, he's on medication. And there's a woman who's drawn. See, this is a fascinating dialectic. Is the woman who's drawn to him originally is drawn to him because of his need, is drawn to him because he's weak, and of course he's drawn to Gwyneth Paltrow and is aggressive with her. And I think that the dialectic that's a sort of classic setup here is how do men get women, basically, and the one is by demonstrating need, and the other is by aggression. And which way do you keep them, and which ones are worth keeping, right? And that's kind of the heart gravitates toward passion. And I
think of Guy Madden's comment that the coward's way is like a way we've all tried to like win women at some point.
Yeah,
exactly. In this case, but yeah, the finale, which I'm obviously not going to blow, I thought was especially acute, and certainly the best thing Gray had done. It was a fine-looking film. I think the ocean light in it, this off-season resort town, that's quite forlorn, and the scenes of like Paltrow in her window and him looking at her had that real parapet scene type of thing going on.
Yeah, nice call. I didn't even think about that.
Well, just she is above him, or he feels that she's above him, which is just as bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's really beautifully done. And I mean, so much in the film, I think, just slipped by me. I mean, as a filmmaker, I just was so in awe of it that I just let it technically, and even in terms of like the directing the actors, I just let it slip by me and wash over me. And usually I don't do that. Usually I'm very aware as I'm watching it. And I'm just impressed with that. I didn't think the guy had that kind of skill. And I'm wearing all gray today, just sort of as a tribute. So.
You know, what it is about him, I think, is that it was the focus on words a little bit more, and the images were often a little bit on the muddy side, so dark. He was like trying to, he lit up things a bit more. He let the city tell part of the story, too.
Right.
And he paid up through the nose to get that Henry Mancini tune during the Lincoln Center sequence. There's this old bit of Henry Mancini exotica that's kind of famous. It turns up in The Big Lebowski. I don't remember the title offhand, but it's like when they go to Jackie Treehorn's house, and it's just mesmerizing when he's like going through the city and just looking out the window when he's finally sprung from those tall, close buildings that he's kind of caged up in.
Yeah, it's amazing that he did things that you see in films all the time, and they felt new. I mean, even a dance club sequence. Like, why did that feel particularly fresh? You know.
It's every place this opens up because we just see him in all these interiors. He's just locked into this life, and his parents are like greasing him into to more imprisonment. So that's the choice of paths. No, it was a good movie. I was really glad. I'm glad you recommended it because, like I say, I wasn't a fan of Grace before, but now I'm going to be watching it with a lot of interest.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks very much for coming on down today. And all the best of luck. We'll be having you down more often, I'm hoping.
Yeah,
and and then we'll be talking to you a lot more when CineQuest comes around.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Welcome back. Our next guest is editor Greg Archer of The Good Times, and he's a film reviewer also, and he's going to tell us about his two favorite films of the year. What have you seen that stuck with you the most, that you left the theater and you knew exactly it was going to be on that end of the year list?
Two films, obviously. Well, more than two, but Away We Go and 500 Days of Summer.
Okay. Like those Pomo comedies, yeah?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I love them because they really dove a lot deeper into relationships and the interactions between people, and it was nice to see that. It was very refreshing to see that in the movie scene this year.
I have to tell you, I wasn't a fan of really either of them, but I can explain. I mean, I think there's aspects of them I did like. I saw 500 Days of Summer again, and it's a lot more nimble than I remembered it when you see it on the small screen. You see, it's like, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's been a favorite of mine ever since Brick. If you saw that one?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, so
terrific actor.
Yeah, he's really on the way up, and Zooey Deschanel, very much the it girl of today. Well, tell me about some of your favorite scenes in the films.
In 500 Days of Summer, well,
sure,
I can't help but love that Hall & Oates dance scene, which is great. I mean, that was just fun. But what I really liked was how Joseph Gordon-Levitt was able to evoke a sense of emotion and show clearly sort of the deeper feelings that go on when you are, I guess, in love with somebody or obsessed with somebody. I thought that was really refreshing to see.
Were you a big fan of Annie Hall?
I was a big fan of Annie Hall.
It's almost like a reprise. It looks it looks backwards, which is unusual for a young, like a young person's movie in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
And everything to the architecture of downtown Los Angeles, to the train trip together, and so forth.
Exactly. Yeah, and Zoe was terrific in that as well. I mean, I just thought the whole film, I thought it had a curious melody, a little symphony. When you're watching it, I think it sort of unfolds sort of beautifully.
But I don't think it neglects jokes either. I think it has a really good sense of humor.
Definitely does.
And then for Away We Go.
Yes.
Describe the film.
Maya Rudolph and John Krasinski go on a road trip to find out, I guess, where home is for them, basically. She's pregnant. She's about to give birth, pretty much 9 months pregnant. And they go on this road trip basically because Krasinski's parents are off on some wildwood adventure. And so they're sort of left solo in the town that they're living in without any real relatives. So they take a while to visit some other relatives or friends to find out where home is. And I just thought it was really sweet the way Maya Rudolph's character in particular comes to realize where that is for her. So.
I think what interested me the most, or at least the part I could agree with the most, was it was really connected to the vibe of the last Bush year.
Definitely so.
Because including like this almost like Fantasia's trip to Canada, they get away and it's like, it's like a wonderland up there, or at least at first it seems that way.
Definitely.
You get the sense of the country being like it's a beautiful country full of ugly people, which you can get that sense sometimes. When things are extremely bleak.
Yeah, I did think some of the characters were a little over the top. I mean, everything seems sort of set up, so they're going one place to another place, and some of the characters, like Allison Janney's character was a little bit over the top.
She was, I enjoyed her. I enjoyed watching her, and I was laughing. I think that I think there's supposed to be a Wizard of Oz theme going on in it, because you think of the Melanie Lynskey character in Montreal. They refer to her as Munch, like Munchkin, and I couldn't figure it out. She's not really anybody's Munchkin. She's large.
Yeah.
But I think that's what. So maybe the extremeness, the extremity of the characters was supposed to reflect that same kind of journey across the board.
Exactly, and Maggie Gyllenhaal's character was also a little bit, but that whole sequence where she, Maggie Gyllenhaal is married to this other guy, and they are, they're very, very liberal, very, sort of esoteric.
Yeah, the liberal fascists, as they say in some corners.
Yeah, and I thought how that played out, especially the scenes with the baby and the carriage and all that, and.
Those are familiar figures. Even though it's set in Wisconsin, I think that was screenwriter. I would propose as screenwriters Vendela Vita and Dave Eggers' little letter to some parents that they knew in Northern California, but that's just a guess.
Exactly.
Anyway, thanks very much for coming on down.
Thank you for having me. It's great to talk about movies with you.
We'll have you get down again then.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Emory Hudson is an award-winning documentary filmmaker, and he's also the staff here at Cinema Scene. And I can't wait to ask him what his 2 favorite films of the year were, or to talk about what he's seen.
Well, thanks, Richard. And I think in honor of Mort, I had to pick 2 of the most neurotic, successful, self-reflective directors operating today. So I had to pick Spike Jonze's Where the Wild Things Are. And Wes Anderson's new film, The Fantastic Mr. Fox.
I got back for thirds on that one. It's holding up really nicely, and as when you go back to a film that you like a lot, but you had problems with, the problems diminish on repeat viewings. Tell me what you think of it.
I thought it was fabulous. Both of these films were 2 of my favorite childhood stories growing up.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I grew up with The Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Okay.
I read it once a week.
Wow.
I loved Roald Dahl. I still love Roald Dahl. And the same is true for Sindak, too. I loved Where the Wild Things Are. It was a nice, scary child story. The Fantastic Mr. Fox, I thought was a great Wes Anderson film. I think it's one of his better films.
Yeah, same here.
I really liked the art direction, of course. It goes back to Jan Svankmajer style of stop motion.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. And it, like Sindak, is also a little scary. George Clooney as a Fantastic Mr. Fox is not all that pleasing. He's a little scary sometimes.
There's a marvelous scene, and it made the children I was watching the film with just jump, when he's sitting down and he's dressed up in his little suit and everything like that and looks very ducky, and his wife puts a plate of pancakes in front of him, and he just savages him, just like a snarling wild animal.
That's what a 4-year-old that I was talking to who had seen it told me about the film. The thing she remembered was how they eat.
For me, what I really like is that Anderson's typical obsessions with fraying families, with fathers that try hard but just like crash and burn and so forth, was adapted to this charming children's tale. So it really had all of its the works going on.
Right, you get the typical Anderson topic of the dysfunctional nuclear family.
Maybe it's the fact that he had Bill Murray's in it, his mascot. I guess actually that's not the right word I should use to describe Murray. But he has a very proactive kind of movie star doing it this time, and I think that really helped like crazy too.
Yeah, of course. Being an Anderson film, it has great voice acting.
Yeah. With George Clooney in it.
With George Clooney, and the characters from the story really pop out. It's definitely an Anderson film, but it has that Roald Dahl edge to it.
Yeah, and a terrific finale too. It's just like gets better every time I look at it. Now, Wild Things. You say you haven't seen it yet, or?
So I actually haven't gotten to see it. As Lisa Jensen was pointing out, you know, a lot of films, and I think especially in the holiday season, have kind of breezed through quickly, or haven't come out to all the markets yet. But I have looked forward to it. The Jewish Contemporary Museum has a good exhibit on Sendak.
Did you go up and see it?
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm hoping to get down there.
Yeah.
You know, again, another good non-traditional children's author being adapted. And I'm really happy to see Spike Jonze putting out another film, and again waxing poetic and being self-reflective.
It's a very personal film, and you go and see it, and it's like, you know, it is obviously a handmade work, and you can see he passed it around trying to figure out to like people like Miranda July, for instance, trying to figure out what to do. I'm not a fan. I did like the locations down south in the state of Victoria in Australia, and it was, you know, it really did make it look like the other side of the world. And the kid was marvelous. The young man, Max Records, I think his name is, was yeah. I think I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about it when you get a chance to see it, because it does, you know, it is handmade.
Right, and I am happy to see animation continue to push the fold. You know, with Up, this fabulous actual film. You know, The Fantastic Mr. Fox is actually an existentialist look at what it means to be who you are.
Coraline is my favorite film, just about my favorite film of the year. That and Up, it goes back and forth every day. This year's been like 1939 for classic films as far as animation is concerned. It astonishes me what a
Coraline was also fabulous and tried to push the boundaries on 3D displays. I'm not sure if that worked or not.
Oh, no, give it another look. It's really good. Well, Emory, thank you very much for coming in for this.
Thank you, Richard.
And we'll be right back. We all lost Morton Marcus at the end of October. He was my partner on this show and a longtime friend of mine, and really a remarkable man. He was funny. He was so gifted. He had such an encyclopedic knowledge of film. And he was so well read, and he really knew about people. He really understood them. And to get to know him a little bit, I'd recommend his autobiography, Striking Through the Mask. It was a real privilege to know him, and it's appropriate we were shooting Cinema Scene today on the kind of the coldest day of the year, because Morton was the kind of man that just carried the sun with him. All I can think about is something that the Sufi poet said, which is, when the roses are gone, what do we do with the thorns?